From League Safe World Headquarters, it's Fantasy Football Almost Daily. With Paul Charchian, Matt Harrison, Christian Peterson, and Brian Johnson.
It's Wednesday. Welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football Almost Daily. And on Wednesdays, guys, we play the Panic Room. What is the Panic Room, you may ask, because you didn't see it last week when it was the first time we ever did it. The Panic Room is a game where my co-host this week, Christian Peterson and Brian Johnson, will debate the merits of 5 players that fantasy owners are panicking about. Now, the premise here is they will have to decide whether the level of panic for these 5 players should be none, some, or acute. Now, then they have to make a case for each guy. And I will decide 100% subjectively whether or not
right.
who made the better case. And when you get the case, when you win, you get a star. When you lose, you do not get a star. And if you are the ultimate loser, you get relegated out like Matt Harrison did last week, and in comes Brian Johnson.
Yeah, I would appreciate it if next time you would address me as defending champion.
That's right.
Or
defending
sir
champion Christian
would
Peterson.
also work.
Your Highness.
Yes.
Your Highness Christian Peterson. To my
Even
right.
better.
Okay, so that's the premise, guys. So let's dive in, beginning with Aaron Rodgers. The first player we'll address in the Panic Room. Your level of concern, is it none, some, or acute? Let's go over some of the stats because it's not pretty. Since the middle of last year, Aaron Rodgers scoring about as many fantasy points as Blaine Gabbert. He's run in touchdowns this year in both games, which has hidden his passing futility. His average game so far this year, 206 yards and 1.5 touchdowns. That's it. So, a lot of concern for Aaron Rodgers out there. Let's talk about whether or not your level of concern is acute. We'll begin with the reigning champion. I believe you've earned the right to go first.
Did you tip
Christian.
the answer there?
Maybe.
Oh, well, he's not. And now there he goes.
Yeah, that's
he doesn't
right.
even know how to play.
He doesn't.
I mean,
He's
this
still
is-
doesn't
I'm already showing the crowd that I've got the wrong answer, obviously.
Well, no, I haven't said. I don't know what I'm not even saying there is the right or wrong answer
This is
yet.
going to be a
The
bloodbath.
point of this is for you guys to make a compelling case for your answer.
Okay.
That's
Whoa.
all.
All right.
Okay.
Shall I go first?
You get to go
As-
first.
as-
Show
okay.
your answer.
My level of concern on Aaron Rodgers is acute. You touched on it already. We can go all the way back to last year. He has been struggling for over a year now. People thought it was the Jordy Nelson thing last year,
Yeah.
but I went back and looked at his finishes, his fantasy finishes week by week. Last year, he was a top 10 quarterback only 7 times.
Out of the whole
this,
year.
And this includes the first 2 weeks of this year.
Yeah.
So for this is 18 games now.
Okay.
He's been a top 10 quarterback only 7 times.
So
He's
less
been-
than half his games he's been outside of the top 10.
Yep, and he's been outside of the top 12, so not even a starter in a normal 12-team league 8 times in that same span. So more often than not, you would have been better off starting somebody else than Aaron Rodgers
Somebody
over the
else
last
on your roster.
year plus.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that even this year was being drafted as maybe the number 1 or number 2 quarterback off the board, probably number 2 behind
Probably
Cam
2.
Newton. But something just doesn't look right. He completed only less than 61% of his passes last year. That was a good 3 or 4 percentage points lower than his career average. This year, he's down to 57%. Jordy Nelson has been highly targeted in the first couple of weeks, but does not look like the same player to me. Does not.
Well,
look
we've
like
seen
he has
nothing
the
downfield.
explosiveness.
None of the explosive downfield
Yeah,
stuff.
all their downfield stuff goes to Devontae Adams, and he can't catch the ball. And Rodgers, frankly, looks visibly frustrated a lot of the time out there. So you drafted him as the number 2 overall quarterback. I think your level of concern is absolutely acute because you may not even be able to start him on a weekly basis.
All right, that was a lengthy, data-filled answer. Let's go to Brian.
I'm going to work on my upside down writing so I can flip it and it'll be
Oh
right.
yeah, that would be
Yeah,
super
right,
cool.
that
So you
would
get more of you get a better reveal.
Yes. But
I like that.
I'm going with some.
Yeah.
Not acute. Those 18 games you referenced, 16 were without Jordy Nelson last year, of course, as we all know. There's a rust issue here, just for Jordy, not just for Jordy, but for the whole offense as a whole. I think 2 road games so far for Rodgers. We all know he's been much better at home. The last 2 years, last year, 265 yards per game, 2+ touchdowns at home, as opposed to 212 yards and less than 2 touchdowns per game on the road.
Okay, pretty big differential. And we'll note that they don't play on the road again until Halloween.
Right. Yeah, so you only got 2 road games out of the way, so you don't have to worry about those. In 2014, when you had Jordy, 292 yards and 3+ touchdowns per game at home, as opposed to 256 on the road and less than 2 touchdowns. So you got a lot of home games coming up. You're not going to get a return on your investment if you're going to trade Aaron Rodgers right now. You're not going to get that value that you drafted him as the top 1 or 2 quarterback. So just stay calm, and that's an ode to relax is what Rodgers said that one time.
Yeah, relax.
But
did he spell it out?
I'm just saying, no, I'm not panicking and trading him for whatever I can get. I'm just going to say some and shut up now.
You both build, I thought, very, very credible arguments, but in my mind, I feel like this thing is we're only 2 games into this. We're only 2 games in, and I want to. Jordy's got plenty of time to still get a lot better. I like your home away splits. Those are very compelling. So while my level of concern is high, I don't think I would be in total panic mode either quite yet. I'm going to give the first star of this game to Brian Johnson.
Wow.
Now, you need to write it on the board. You don't know this. You haven't done this before. You have to write it on the board.
Can we get actual stars next week?
Put it on the board. Right. You got to put it on the board. There we go.
Booyah.
Panic room player number 2, Allen Robinson. Through 2 games, just 9 catches, 126 yards. This is not what we expected from a universally ranked top 10 wide receiver. And Allen Robinson has drawn Jason Verrett in week 2, and that was pretty much a shutdown assignment for him. That was certainly part of the problem. But also, the Jaguars' offense just hasn't been as functional overall as people would like, in part because they've been stuck with T.J. Yeldon. Huge problem for them. One that they were able to overcome a lot of last year, but somehow he looks even worse this year. Allen Robinson, your level of concern, none, some, or acute. We begin with Brian.
I'm going 0, none, zippy, squadouche. I'm not worried at all about Allen Robinson. Like
squadouche?
you said,
how do you spell squadouche, by the way?
I have it as SQUADOOSH.
And
I didn't go with like the douche spell.
Right.
What is it, entomology, or what is it, the origin
squadouche?
Yeah, what is that? Where does
I'll
that
get
come
back
from?
to you on that. I don't know.
Okay.
I grew up on the East Coast.
Sure it's not a real word.
It's not. It sounds like some Italian deal.
I think
like
you
that's what
you can spell
a couple
it
of
however
Jersey
you want
guys in sweatsuits would end up saying.
0% Italian, in case you were wondering.
You are 0% Italian,
0% Italian.
but you do have Jersey roots.
I do.
But
Minnesota roots.
if I went to like Rome and just started yelling, walking up to people and saying squadouche, hey squadouche, what would happen?
I don't know. The latter portion of the word has kind of a poor connotation, so I'm guessing
in English
it would not be received well.
Maybe not.
Right.
In Rome, that might mean something very different.
It's possible.
What have I done? Who are we talking about again? Allen
Robinson.
Robinson.
You
said
no
Jason
concern.
Verrett shut him down. Not a surprise there. One of the top shutdown corners in the game. Green Bay was a tough matchup. Sam Shields was healthy. Demarius Randall, an able corner. So I'm not panicking on Allen Robinson. Here are his next games. Baltimore, Indy, then his bye, then at Chicago, Oakland, Tennessee. That's 5+ matchups for a wide receiver. He's an elite talent. The Jaguars' defense is not any better, which we thought it would be. Reducing Blaine Gabbert's pass attempts. He has the most in the NFL. I'm buying Allen Robinson if anyone's selling. No worries for me.
Okay, Christian.
I also have squadouche worries about Allen Robinson, so I went none. Many of the same arguments that Brian just said. The schedule is going to lighten up here. He ran into Jason Verrett last week, who's starting to turn into a shutdown corner. He was very good last year. He's been even better this year, so no surprise that he was held in check there. He had 15 targets in week 1, so the targets are there. The Jaguars are just like we thought they were. They're going to be behind on the scoreboard a lot. Right. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot, and Allen Robinson is going to get his, and it's going to start over these next 3, 4, or 5 weeks when the schedule lightens up. So no concern for me either.
I think you both gave the right answers. Just Brian had the advantage of going first, and basically you had to parrot all of his answers. So once again, I have to give the star here to Brian Johnson. Number 3, Jeremy Langford. Langford couldn't have looked more ordinary over the first couple of games of this year, which was always the concern going in with Jeremy Langford, right? Wasn't a special player. You look back to last year, and if he was a guy who basically just took what his offense gave him and didn't necessarily earn a lot of extra yards, there's a lot of concern right now for a player who has 28 carries and just 85 yards to show for it, 3 yards per carry. So he scored a couple of touchdowns, which I guess helps, but maybe also masks some concerns that people might want to have. Jeremy Langford, your level of panic, is it none, some, or acute? Christian.
I'm going to go with some. I don't think there's really any choice but to have at least some panic on Langford based on what we've seen. He's averaging just 3 yards per carry. He does have the 2 touchdowns, which we know he's a very effective guy at the goal line. And I think, people are talking about Kadeem Carey and Jordan Howard and how they're this threat to his playing time. I don't know that's the case. Langford was still on the field 60% of the time. In that Monday night game that everybody is talking about where the others got some runs. So it's Langford still is the guy. He's taken 28 of the 34 handoffs that they've given to their running back. So he's still getting a lot of the work. The other guys are on the field a little bit more, but they're not getting the ball when they're on the field. So unfortunately, the Bears offense is not going to be any good this year. So he's got that going against him, but people knew that coming in. That's why he was a 5th rounder in your fantasy draft. That's why he wasn't a 1st or 2nd rounder, because of all of these same concerns. So I don't see that anything that's happened so far should raise your level of panic on Jeremy Langford. So just some.
All right. What is your level of squadushness for Jeremy Langford, Brian?
I'm going acute.
Acute? Okay.
Jeremy Langford sucks. The Texans are averaging 5.26 yards per carry against this year. Langford went for 3.4 against them. That goes to show how much better the other running backs did against the Texans. And the Eagles, 4.4 yards per carry is allowed. Langford averaged 2.6 yards per carry against them.
So he's good for about 2 yards per carry. It's a very small sample size, 2 games.
It's a tiny sample size.
It's a tiny sample size.
Yeah, he's
he had
2
an
yards per
awful
carry
fumble. I thought Jordan Howard looked good, had 5 touches for like 30-something yards. Was good in college, monster games against Michigan and Iowa when he was with Indiana.
Yeah.
Something people didn't do last year. He's an able runner. Now, Langford just doesn't look very good, so I'm very worried about him.
I think it was 23 yards, but we'll go with 30-something. Seems fine.
Oh, I will do research during the next break, but 5 for 31, I'm going to say. But I'm going to go with the cute. I'm very worried about Langford. I'm adding Jordan Howard anywhere I own Jeremy Langford. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, opportunity is worth a lot in fantasy football. Neither of you mentioned the state of the Bears defense, which is a real worry for me. This defense was already shaky, and then the Monday night apocalypse for this defense was not insignificant. I'm worried they're going to be trailing by a lot in a lot of games. Nevertheless, he's the guy up, and we know if there's one thing we know about John Fox and with rookies, it's he hates to play him. I mean, he's very reticent, and he's very slow to make moves, personnel moves. For me, I think it's somewhere between some and acute, but I'm giving the right answer here to some because opportunity is a huge factor in fantasy football, and he's still getting all the work for the time being, and I don't see that changing. Panic room guy number 4 is Golden Tate, a player who last year was among league leaders in targets and receptions, yards, didn't have as many touchdowns as we wanted. Then this year rolls in, and we all figure, well, that's going to carry over and should even improve without Calvin Johnson there. Marvin Jones is a good player, but he's not Calvin Johnson, so we figured it'd be just as good. Well, through 2 games, Jones looks really good, and Golden Tate's done virtually nothing. 9 catches, 54 measly yards through 2 games. I thought that would be, I thought it was a worst-case scenario for his 1-game totals. What is your level of concern for Golden Tate? None, some, or acute? Brian?
I'm going to go with some.
Okay.
As evidenced by the sum on my board.
Yes.
3rd most targets inside the 10 and 5-yard line last year for Tate. That was very, very nice to see. 0 so far in the first 2 games. Not nice to see. Has target totals of 7 and 9, so they're still throwing the ball his way. The Lions will be throwing a ton this year, as we all expect. And but Marvin Jones is around. He's led the team in targets so far, so there's a concern there. Eric Ebron is emerging, but Tate's still going to average about 8 targets per game. He will get work in the red zone eventually, so he's not droppable by any means. You could trade him. You might want to bench him this week against Green Bay, but I'm still holding on to him. I like him a little bit, so I'm going to go some.
That was you just talked in circles. Okay. Can you top that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I sure hope that they start targeting him inside the 5-yard line because he's averaging 6 yards per catch this year. So he's not going to score unless they actually throw it to him inside the 5-yard line. He had 9 targets last week and caught just 2 of them. That's Golden Tate's thing is sure-handedness and catching the ball when it comes to him. So if he's going to start not making the most out of his targets, then he's in really big trouble. I think Marvin Jones is the clear number one here. 21 targets through 2 games, 12 receptions, over 200 yards. I think Anquan Bolden is more involved than we thought he was going to be. He scored a touchdown last week.
I did not expect that.
Yeah, and I think so that's taken away some of Golden Tate's work as well. So if he's going to be strictly this possession type receiver who's running
which he
patterns
shouldn't be.
that are 5 or 6 yards downfield.
He always used to be one of the most dynamic after the catch runners that there was, and we haven't seen that materialize.
That seems to have evaporated. So yeah, I mean, people were taking Golden Tate as a probably he was
wide receiver. He was like wide receiver 15
yeah,
on my
15,
board,
16.
Like that.
And so he was maybe your first or certainly your second wide receiver.
Yeah.
So at this point, the production that he has and the way that it looks like it's going in Detroit, it is a acute level of concern for Golden Tate.
I think you just built a better case. I think in my mind, some is probably the right answer, but I think you built a hardier case, and so I'm giving the victory to Christian Peterson.
We'll go to a decisive fifth
We go to the
here.
very decisive
the rubber player.
Jordan Howard, we are told, week 2, 3 carries, 22 yards.
I said touches, Matt. How many catches did he have? He had 2. Do the math, please.
Okay, now.
Check
20,
the tape.
22
I said
now.
5 catches for 30-plus yards.
You can round 22 to 30-something. Now.
Round number 5.
Yeah,
and
catches aren't important in fantasy
going to
football.
be decisive.
I feel bad
Derrick
for all you 22-year-olds
Henry.
out there who are now 30-somethings.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Derrick
Twilight
Henry has gotten the ball infrequently. He's gotten roughly half of the total touches that DeMarco Murray has, and Murray has looked good. Henry so far hasn't been able to get anything going. Henry's a guy that needs more help from his offensive line than Murray does, and the offensive line has not played well. Henry has chipped in a little bit through the receiving game, 3 catches, 50 yards, but that pales next to what Murray has done. So far, this is about a 2-to-1 ratio of Murray over Henry. He's also leading in the touchdown category, 2-0. What's your level of concern for Derrick Henry? We will go none, some, or acute.
I'm going to go with some on Derrick Henry. I was not as high on him coming into the year as some people in this room may have been in the first place. So what we've seen so far is kind of what I expected. I think DeMarco Murray is taking about 2/3 of the snaps and 2/3 of the production, and frankly, he's been better. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry. Henry is at 3.1 yards per carry. The only reason Henry's numbers look good is because he had kind of a fluky long reception in week 1. I don't think that's really part of his game. He has 3 catches. Murray has 12 catches and 2 receiving touchdowns. The one thing we haven't seen yet is how they're going to use these 2 at the goal line.
Right.
They've gotten inside the 10, well, pretty rarely, and when they have, they've passed it 6 times inside the 10, and they have yet to run the ball.
Which is weird for exotic smash mouth team, and you've got Derrick Henry who's built for
so I don't know for
use.
sure if it's been Murray on the field when they've gotten inside the 10 or if it's been Henry like some people believe it will be. So that part of it I think is still to be seen. So it's possible he's still going to be the touchdown guy here. Mm-hmm. So I have just some concern as opposed to acute.
Okay. Brian, what have you got?
I can't add any stats to that. That was a nice breakdown. I'm going to go with none.
None.
Just because I was high on DeMarco Murray. I said he was a great value in the 5th round. I expected nothing other than Derrick Henry than a handcuff or a guy that'll step in if Murray goes down. He'll get his carries.
Are you making a case for acute concern, or are you talking about none?
None, because he's doing what I expected him to do.
I don't care what you thought. This is for fantasy owners. This is not for you and your personal team.
Well,
you're whether or not
I'm not
should
that worried.
Fantasy owners have none, some, or an acute level
What should
of
they
concern?
be panicked about? Him not being a starter?
Yeah, it does kind of depend on what they drafted him, what they expected when they drafted him.
If you've got Derrick Henry roster,
if you're
right
Paul
now,
Charchian, how concerned are you? Is that the real question?
Sure. I mean,
Okay, you're very concerned.
We're talking to Derrick Henry owners and anybody who might be thinking this is a buy low moment on Derrick Henry. Tell the fantasy community what your what is your prognosis for Henry going forward. If you think he's going to be awful all year, then it should be an acute level of panic right now.
Okay, it's acute then because I like Murray. He looks great. I've liked Murray all along. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but
are you sure?
Murray was not built to be a goal line back. He's also built to be a goal line back. We've seen that throughout his career. He scored in the preseason from the 1 against the starters. They're going to give him that work. So I guess I'm worried about Henry if I was expecting him to be an RB1 or an RB2 because Murray's not going anywhere unless he gets hurt.
All right.
I know I tanked my chances there, but whatever.
Well, you reversed the concept of basically the whole game. I don't know how you made it to round 5 before we figured out that you didn't understand.
It's going to be very controversial. If you give this to Brian, because he gave every answer.
He did.
You can't do that.
He gave none, some, and a cute. What I think nobody is factoring in is that we're 2 games into a rookie's career, right? And that there's another 14 games for this situation to change. And nobody brought up DeMarco Murray, who through his early parts of his Cowboys tenure was hurt constantly. There's still a scenario here where where Derrick Henry ends up having a fair amount of fantasy value. We're just not seeing it right now. And
sounds like you have just some.
I have some level of panic. Our third star goes to the reigning champion and continuing champion, Christian Peterson.
Came back from 2 down. I ran the table on the last 3.
How about that?
Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to happen.
Nah,
I'll be honest. I thought Brian was going to run away.
I thought
with
he
it.
was too.
I did.
Brian looks a little bitter.
No,
I'll be honest.
I'm not.
He always looks that way.
That's just his usual level of facial constipation.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. What's up tomorrow? I'm not here tomorrow. What's
it's the buy low, sell high.
Buy low, sell high. You say.
And the buy high, sell low.
Buy high, sell low.
Stuff.
All right. You'll want to come back to fantasy football almost daily at LeagueSafePost.com for all of that. Also, by Thursday, we've got all of our player rankings up for week number 3. Those will all be there as well. That starts filtering onto the site beginning Wednesdays, and by really late Wednesday, Thursday morning, it's all up. So you've got all of that at your disposal as well. All right. We'll see you then. Thanks.